before I get into this story, I need you to do something for me. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And after you hear what I'm about to tell you, leave a comment. Tell me if you've ever felt something watching you when you thought you were alone. Tell me if you've ever heard a voice you shouldn't have heard. Tell me if you believe places can hold memories or something darker. I don't usually talk like this. I'm not a storyteller. I'm not a writer. I'm not someone who looks for ghosts or uploads creepy videos for fun. I'm just a man who has carried something heavy for years, and I think it's time I finally set it down. My name doesn't matter much, but what I did does. I was a Navajo Tribal Police officer for a little over a decade. Most of that time, I patrolled the lands around Canyon de Chelly, here in Arizona. If you've never been there, it's one of the most beautiful places on Earth. I'm not exaggerating. The canyon walls rise high and red, like they were carved by hands older than time itself. Some cliffs glow bright like fire when the sun hits them. Others stay cool and quiet, holding shadows even at noon. Visitors come from all over the world to see it. They stand on the overlooks and take pictures. They walk the trails. They drive the rim roads and stare down into those winding paths below. But they don't know the canyon like we do. They don't feel its weight or its history. They don't hear the things you sometimes hear when the wind stops and the night grows still. I grew up hearing stories about that place. My grandmother used to tell me that the canyon remembers everything. She said that every cry, every step, every secret carried down there stays in the stone forever. When I was a kid, I didn't understand what she meant. When I got older, I did. Back when I worked patrol, my days started early and ended late. Sometimes I'd be out before sunrise, driving slow along the dirt roads, checking on campsites and making sure hikers signed in and out. The canyon is breathtaking in the morning. Mist floats above the cottonwoods, and the cliffs look soft, like they're waking up with you. Most days were peaceful. I'd help tourists who got turned around. I'd talk to elders who sold jewelry or pottery near the lookout points. I'd keep an eye on visitors who thought the rules didn't apply to them. You'd be amazed how many people think it's okay to climb fences or wander into restricted areas because they want a better picture. But nights were different. People say the desert is quiet at night, but that's not true. You hear coyotes calling to one another. You hear owls and insects. You hear the wind dragging itself across the sand, making little swirling sounds that don't seem to come from anywhere. Sometimes you hear footsteps, even when you're alone. I remember one night in particular. It was late, close to midnight, and I was driving along the South Rim Road. My headlights made long streaks on the canyon walls, and the whole place felt too big, too empty. I had stopped at one of the overlooks just to stretch my legs and breathe in the cold air. I always like watching the stars out there. You can see thousands of them, more than most people ever get to see in their whole life. I was standing near the fence, just listening to the night, when something caught my eye. At first, it looked like a person walking along the canyon rim, about 40 yards away. The shape was dark, like a shadow pulling itself out of the deeper shadows behind it. I thought maybe it was one of the hikers who got lost or someone ignoring the signs again. Happens more often than you'd think. But then I looked closer. There was no trail over there. Nothing but loose sand and uneven rock. No one should have been walking in that spot, especially not at night. I told myself it was probably just an animal casting a weird shadow. Maybe a stray dog or a deer. But the way it moved, it didn't move like any animal I knew. It walked slow, almost gliding. The legs didn't bend right. The shape almost stretched as it moved, like the darkness around it didn't want to let go. I reached into the patrol SUV and grabbed my flashlight. When I pointed the beam at it, the light hit the rim and the figure was gone. Not like it ducked or ran. Not like it jumped. It was just there 1 second, and then nothing. I walked toward the spot with the flashlight pointed low, scanning the ground. I expected to see footprints or disturbed sand or something. But there was nothing. No prints. No tracks. No sign that anything had been there at all. The wind wasn't blowing hard enough to erase footprints, and the sand wasn't firm enough to hide them. For a long moment, I just stood there listening. The canyon was silent. Not quiet, silent. No wind. No insects. No animals. My grandmother used to say that when a place goes silent like that, something is listening to you. I shook off the thought. I told myself I was tired. I'd been working long hours that week. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe the shadows were messing with the edges of my vision. It happens when you're out there long enough. Your mind fills the empty spaces with shapes and movements. Still, I felt something cold crawl up the back of my neck. It felt like someone whispering against my skin. I kept telling myself it was nothing, but my body didn't believe me. My hands were shaking when I got back into the SUV. I sat there with the engine running, staring at the spot where I'd seen the figure. The night felt heavier. The darkness seemed thicker, like it had weight, like it was pressing in on the windows. I kept waiting for the shadow to show itself again, but the rim stayed empty. I tried calling it into dispatch, but halfway through dialing, I stopped. What would I say? I saw a shadow that vanished. I'd never hear the end of it. Tribal officers joke around a lot. You have to, with the things you see and deal with, but some things are too strange to turn into jokes. Some things make you feel small and foolish as soon as you say them out loud. So I kept it to myself. I put the SUV in gear and drove away. But as I pulled back onto the main road, I checked the rear view mirror. The darkness behind me seemed to move. I blinked, and it was still. I drove faster after that. For the rest of the shift, I couldn't shake that crawling feeling at the base of my skull. I kept checking my mirrors, checking the sides of the road, checking the cliffs. I even kept the radio low because the quiet felt safer than any sound. It was like my mind knew something was wrong, even if I couldn't explain what. When dawn started to break, I pulled over at the ranger station to clock out. The sky was a pale blue, the kind that looks thin and tired. I felt the same way. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. My hands were sore from gripping the steering wheel too tight. But more than anything, my chest felt heavy, like I was carrying something I didn't understand. I told myself it was just the long hours, just stress, just shadows, just nothing. But the truth is that something had started that night. Something quiet, something patient, something waiting. Looking back, I think that was the first time the canyon noticed me. Not the tourists, not the hikers. Me. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have listened to the stories I grew up with. I should have paid attention to the way the air felt, the way the shadows moved, the way the silence wrapped itself around me too tightly. I felt my stomach drop. A sharp breeze hit my face and made my eyes water, bringing with it the smell of cold stone and wet earth. I leaned forward cautiously and scanned the canyon walls, then the floor below. Nothing, only darkness. The hair on my arm stood up. Something was wrong, very wrong. Hello, I called out, instantly regretting it. My voice echoed once across the canyon, bouncing off the opposite wall. But instead of fading, the echo almost stretched out, twisting slightly, like someone else was repeating after me. I stepped back from the edge. A few seconds later, the faint humming sound returned. Not loud, but close. Too close. It sounded like it was rising from the rocks beneath my feet. I took another step away. My flashlight dimmed for half a second, just a flicker, but in that moment, I thought I saw something move near the base of the cliff. A small shape, pale and quick. When the light steadied, there was nothing there. My breath came slow and shaky. I needed to radio this in, but part of me didn't want to. I didn't want to hear my name come through that speaker again. I forced myself back to the SUV. The interior light came on when I opened the door, making the inside glow warm yellow. It felt safe for a moment, like a small island in the middle of endless dark. That's when I saw another vehicle's headlights approaching down the road. Steady, slow, familiar. It was an old Ranger truck. Thomas stepped out. Thomas was one of the older Navajo Rangers who'd been around long before I started. He knew the land better than anyone. People said he could read the dirt the way other men read books. I always respected him, not just because of his age, but because of the calm way he moved across the canyon's edge, as if he understood its moods. He walked toward me with his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "Evening," he said quietly. "Evening," I replied. Thomas had one of those faces that didn't change much. He could be looking at fire or a funeral, and the expression would be the same, soft but unreadable. But tonight, something was different. His eyes were sharp, cautious, like he already knew what I found. "What brings you out here?" I asked, checking on things. He said, "North Rim's been strange lately." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, you could say that." He waited, giving me room to speak. So I told him everything. The footprints, the radio, the humming, the sense that someone was always watching me. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look surprised. He just held that calm, steady posture. When I finished, he let out the smallest breath. "You shouldn't be out here alone at night," he said. "It's my patrol," I answered. He shook his head. "I'm not talking about rules." A quiet moment stretched between us. Then he looked out over the canyon. His eyes scanned the walls, the shadows, the drops that looked like endless pits. "Don't look down into the canyon at night," he said softly. "They look back." I tried to laugh, thinking he was messing with me. "Come on, Thomas." "Really?" He didn't smile, not even a little. "I'm serious," he said. "There are old stories here, old things. You hear them before you ever see them. Once you see them, that's when they start seeing you." My heart thumped hard. What exactly did I see? I asked. Thomas didn't answer. Instead, he picked up a handful of sand and let it slip through his fingertips, watching the grains fall like he was reading them. Finally, he said, "Be careful on this rim. Some places carry voices. Some carry things pretending to be voices." A cold pulse moved through my chest. Before I could say anything else, Thomas turned and headed back to his truck. He gave me one last look, deep, dark, worried. "Get home before midnight," he said. "And don't stop again tonight unless you have to." Then he drove off, his taillights fading into the distance. I stood there alone, the canyon breathing slowly beneath me. His warning stayed with me the entire drive back. Even after I showered, ate dinner, and tried to sleep, my mind kept returning to his face, to the seriousness in his tone. Don't look down into the canyon at night. But I had looked, and something had looked back. I didn't know it then, but that night on the North Rim was a turning point, the moment when things shifted from strange to dangerous, from uneasy to impossible. Because the next time I heard the canyon, it spoke clearer. And the thing waiting inside, it didn't just whisper, it called for me, in my own voice. Thomas's warning didn't leave my mind after that night. It followed me everywhere, into my home, into my sleep, and especially back out onto the canyon roads. His voice kept replaying in my head. Don't look down into the canyon at night. They look back. I tried convincing myself he was being dramatic, but deep down I knew he wasn't the type to exaggerate. He said those words like someone who had lived them. The next evening, I felt the way of the canyon even before I left the station. The sky was a dull gray, like storm clouds were trying to form but couldn't gather their strength. The air felt heavy. Not cold, just thick, like I had to push through it. I tried to shake it off, blaming stress, lack of sleep, or maybe too much coffee. But the feeling didn't fade. From the moment I started my patrol, strange things began happening, small things, but things I couldn't ignore anymore. As I drove along the rim road, something tapped on the side of my SUV. A sharp, quick tap on the back panel. I hit the brakes and grabbed my flashlight. Nothing. No branches. No loose rocks. No animals. I checked the mirrors. Nothing behind me. The dust settled slowly, hugging the ground. I shook my head and kept driving. A few minutes later, it happened again. Another tap, this time on the passenger door. I looked over fast enough to catch something dark sliding out of view, but it could have been nothing. A reflection. A trick of the eye. I forced myself to believe that because the alternative was too disturbing. But then the tapping continued. Light taps. Hard taps. Sometimes a slow, dragging tap that moved from one side of the SUV to the other. Worst of all, it didn't stop when the vehicle was moving. That's when I knew it wasn't branches or rocks. I cranked the radio up to drown out the noise, but the tapping grew louder, almost matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. When I slowed down, the tapping slowed. When I sped up, it quickened, like something was keeping pace with me, something running alongside the SUV, hidden in the night. By the time I reached Spider Rock Overlook, I needed a break. My hands were trembling. My throat felt tight. I parked the SUV and stepped out, breathing in the cold desert air. The canyon stretched wide and dark below. Spider Rock rose from the floor like a thin tower, a silhouette against the fading sky. I walked to the railing, trying to calm myself. Then I heard it, a voice rising from the darkness below. A woman's voice. Help me. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. Too clear. The kind of clarity you hear when someone is only a few feet away. But when I leaned over the railing, the canyon floor was nothing but a black void. Hello, I called, feeling my pulse spike. The voice repeated, this time closer. Help, please. Something in the tone made my skin crawl. It didn't sound panicked. It sounded practiced, like someone saying a line they had memorized. No shaking, no crying, just steady, soft pleading. My breath froze in my throat. I reached for my radio. This is Officer. I stopped. My name stuck in my mouth. I didn't want to say it out loud. Not here. Not to whatever was below. I swallowed hard, forcing the air back into my lungs. Dispatch! I've got a possible hiker or civilian calling for help near Spider Rock, requesting confirmation if anyone is reported missing. The radio clicked. Negative. Dispatch said, no reports of missing persons today. You sure you heard someone? I looked back into the canyon. The darkness didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Yes, I whispered. I'm sure. There was a pause. Do you need backup? I hesitated. Backup wasn't the issue. This wasn't something backup could help with, not unless backup could see in the dark and see what wasn't supposed to be there. No, I said finally. I'll look around a bit more. I lowered the radio and dialed Thomas's number. I didn't know why. Maybe I just needed to hear a familiar voice. Maybe I wanted guidance. Or maybe I hoped he'd say something that would make this make sense. He picked up on the second ring. What did you hear? He asked immediately, skipping any greeting. I paused. A woman calling for help. Another long silence. Then in a slow, heavy voice, he asked, did it sound like one voice or many pretending to be one? My mouth went dry. What does that even mean? I asked, answer me. He said, firmer this time. I closed my eyes, replaying the sound in my head. The tone had been strange. Too steady. Too clean. Like someone mimicking what they thought a human cry for help sounded like. It didn't sound normal, I admitted. It sounded practice. Thomas exhaled to the phone, a long, tired breath. Then leave, now. Don't answer it again. Don't speak to it. Don't look for it. My chest tightened. Why? What is it? I can't explain it over the phone, he said. Just leave Spider Rock. And whatever you do, don't repeat what you heard, not even to yourself. That last part sent a shiver through my spine. I started walking back to my SUV when the voice rose again, clearer than before. Help me? I didn't look back. I didn't lean over the railing again. I got into my SUV, locked the doors, and drove. But the voice lingered in my head all night. The next day, I went to the ranger office. I needed answers, real ones, not warnings, not cryptic half-sentences. I needed to understand what was happening in this canyon. The ranger office was small, built from old timber and stone. It smelled like dust, coffee, and paper that hadn't been touched in years. Most people only saw the front area, the maps, brochures, safety warnings. But in the back storage room, stacked on metal shelves, were decades of old reports. I started digging through them. At first, it was the usual stuff: lost tourists, minor injuries, wildlife encounters. But the deeper I went, the stranger the files became. Reports with half-sentences, descriptions that didn't make sense, words scribbled out, pages missing. One officer, back in the 70s, wrote about hearing breathing in the stone walls. Another wrote about shadows moving where no shadows should be. One report mentioned voices that didn't belong to any living person. Then I found something that made my heart drop. A cluster of files from different years, 1954, 1971, 1986, 1999, all from officers who had reported strange events around the same general area of the canyon, a section near an old, unmarked path, a path that wasn't on modern maps. The reports mentioned a figure walking along a sheer drop, footprints ending at cliffs, whispers with no source, sudden silence that felt unnatural, a pull toward the canyon floor. But something else stood out. After each cluster of reports, the strange activity stopped for years. Silence. No mentions. No follow-ups. It was like the officers either quit, transferred, or disappeared. A sinking feeling grew in my chest. I bookmarked the files and shut the cabinet. That night, sleep came quickly, but it wasn't restful. My dreams weren't just dreams. They felt like memories I didn't have. In one, I walked through a dark hallway carved inside the canyon wall. The walls pulsed like breathing stone. Shadows followed close behind, whispering a language I didn't know, but somehow understood. They called my name. They laughed softly. And when I tried to turn around, my feet sank into the sand like the canyon was swallowing me whole. I woke up sweating, gasping for air. The dreams didn't stop. Night after night, I found myself wandering deeper into impossible cliff corridors. Every time, I felt something behind me. And every time, I woke up before I could turn around. After a week of nightmares, I returned to the canyon with binoculars. I told myself it was for patrol, but really I needed to see something. Anything that made sense. The wind was low that evening. The sky glowed orange and pink. I stood near a ridge and scanned the walls. Nothing. Nothing. Then, something moved. I focused the binoculars on a sheer sandstone wall across the canyon. There, standing on a ledge no wider than a few inches, was a person. At least, it looked like a person. Tall, still, facing straight up at me. My breath caught. The thing didn't move, didn't shift weight, didn't look away. It just stared, from an impossible position. No trail led to that spot. No climber could stand like that without holding on to something. But it stood there perfectly balanced, like gravity didn't apply. I lowered the binoculars, shaking, looked with my bare eyes. Nothing. The ledge was empty. I raised the binoculars again, and the figure was gone entirely. But a second later, a voice rose from the canyon floor. Not loud, not rushed, just a single, soft exhale. A breathy whisper that drifted up the cliffs like smoke. It carried my name. My full name. I dropped the binoculars. They hit the ground with a thud. My legs felt weak. The canyon seemed to pulse beneath me, like it was alive, like it was aware. And for the first time, I felt something deeper than fear. Recognition. Like whatever was down there knew me, was waiting for me, had been watching me long, before I ever noticed it. I backed slowly toward my SUV, never turning my back fully on the canyon. And that breathy whisper followed me long after the sun dipped below the rim. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept circling back to the old reports, to the unmarked trail, to the figure on the cliff, to Thomas's warning, to the voice saying my name as if it owned it. I didn't know it yet, but this was the moment the canyon stopped watching from a distance. It started calling me closer, and the next time it called, Thomas would give me the truth. After the canyon said my name, I knew I couldn't treat any of this like simple nerves anymore. I still went to work. I still put on the uniform and climbed into the patrol SUV. From the outside, I was just another officer starting another night shift. On the inside, I felt like I was walking around with crack running through my chest. Every sound made me jump. Every patch of shadow along the rim looked deeper than it had before. When the engine turned off, the silence felt crowded, like there were too many things in it. For 2 nights, I tried to ignore it. I told myself to focus on the job, to keep my head down and do the work. But ignoring the canyon felt like trying not to think about breathing. On the 3rd day, I gave up on pretending I had it under control. After my shift briefing, instead of going straight to the SUV, I went to the back of the ranger office. I knew where Thomas usually sat when he didn't want to be bothered. He was there, hunched over an old topographic map, a coffee mug beside him, The overhead light buzzed faintly. "Thomas," I said. He looked up, studied my face for a long moment, then nodded at the empty chair across from him. "Sit," he said. "You're not sleeping." I sat down. "I need to tell you everything," I said. "All of it." "I'm listening," he replied. So I talked. I told him about the shadow that walked where there was no trail, and how it vanished without leaving a footprint. I told him about the tapping on the doors and windows of the SUV, the way it kept pace even when I was driving. I told him about the woman's voice by Spider Rock, begging for help in that flat, strange tone that never changed. About his question over the phone, whether I heard one voice or many pretending, and how that question scared me more than the sound itself. I told him about the old reports gathering dust in the back room, all clustered around the same stretch of canyon. About the unmarked path that kept getting mentioned and then crossed out. About the dreams of walking inside the stone, down a hallway that never ended. I told him about the figure standing on a sheer wall, looking right up at me from a ledge that shouldn't hold anything alive. And last, I told him about the whisper of my own name rising from the canyon floor, in a voice that sounded like mine. When I finished, my throat hurt. Thomas didn't joke. He didn't tell me I was imagining it. He folded the map very carefully, his hands slow and precise, then set it aside. "You should have come to me sooner," he said at last. The word stung. I didn't know what to say. I muttered, "I still don't." He stood up. "Come outside." We stepped out the back door into the cooling evening. The canyon rim drew a black line against the sky. Thomas leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. "There are stories we tell the visitors," he said. "Nice stories. Stories that fit in brochures. History they can nod along to, legends they can post jokes about online. Then there are stories we only tell our own people. And even then, only when we have to. You think it's time to tell me one of those?" I said. He gave a small, tired smile. "I think the canyon already started telling you. I'm just filling in some of the words." I waited, heart pounding. "You grew up around here," he said. "You've heard the tales about spirits in the rocks, about Spider-Woman, about places you don't whistle at, and places you don't sleep." "Sure," I said. "I just thought they were warnings. Ways to keep kids from wandering off." "They are warnings," he said. "Just not only for kids." He looked past me to where the land dropped away. "There are old things in that canyon," he went on. "Not ghosts like in movies. Not demons. Not skinwalkers. Just beings. They don't have bodies the way we do. They live in the cracks and in the deep places. They don't have their own voices, so they use what they can steal." My skin crawled. "Steal from who?" "From anyone who gets close enough," he said. "Every word spoken at the rim, every prayer, every scream, every whisper, this place hears them. Some sounds fade, some sink in. Sometimes something waits and picks them up, tries them on." I thought of the voice by Spider Rock, repeating the same line. So what I heard wasn't a living woman, he said, cutting me out gently. It was a sound wearing her shape, like an echo that learned how to walk. A cold shiver went down my back. He continued, "Certain cliffs and ruins are worse. They carry more memory. Places where people died hard, where there was fear, anger, betrayal. Those places don't let go of what they saw. At night, especially when it's still, those memories move. Most of the time, they only play themselves back. Sometimes they reach. And when they reach, they grab people," I said. He nodded once. "If those people let them." I hesitated, then asked the question I had avoided for years. "Is that what happened to your brother?" His eyes didn't change much, but his mouth tightened. "We were on patrol together," he said slowly. "A long time ago, out by the North Rim. Night like ink, no wind. We were about to head in when we heard crying. Sounded like a boy, down on the canyon floor." He swallowed. "We called in," he said. "Nobody missing. No campers unaccounted for. But the crying kept going. Same pitch, same pauses. It didn't move. My brother said we couldn't ignore it. He started down an old path. I stayed up top." He stared at the dark horizon as if he could still see that night, At first I could hear both, he said. His boots on rock, the crying, then his footsteps faded. The crying stayed the same. When it finally stopped, he didn't answer when I called. He took a breath. We searched for days, he said. We found nothing. It was like the canyon just erased him. Later, I heard that exact same crying 2 more times, he added. Same place, same pauses, not similar, exact, like someone pressed play on an old tape. He looked back at me. So yes, he said, that's what I think happened to him. The voice that called to you, he said, is the same type of thing. It's not alive. It's bait. And now it has my voice. I whispered. Yes, he said. Now it does. For a moment I couldn't speak. Can I get it back? I asked, can I break whatever it is? You can stop giving it more, he said. You can stop feeding the connection. But you can't pretend it never touched you. You listened when it called. You went to the edge. You looked. You spoke. Every one of those things is a thread. Anger flashed through my fear. Why didn't you tell me more before? Why just say don't look down at night and leave it there? He raised an eyebrow. If I'd told you everything the first week you started here, would you have believed me? Or would you have gone out trying to prove nothing was there? I started to answer, then stopped. I'm telling you now because you can't afford to be stubborn anymore, he said. Ask for day patrols. Stay away from that unmarked path. Don't stop at the overlooks after dark unless someone's life is on the line. And if you hear a voice in the canyon, any voice, that sounds familiar, you turn around and walk away. You understand? His words sank into me like stones. What if it starts using me on other people? I asked, what if some tourist hears my voice calling for help? He looked tired. It might, he said. That's how these things spread. Through people who don't know they're carrying something with them. I thought of all the old reports, the officers who'd heard things and then just stopped writing. How do you stay here? I asked, knowing what you know. This is my home, he said simply. Leaving wouldn't make it safer. And someone has to be here to tell the stories when they're needed. He put a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and warm. Your story with this place isn't over yet, he said. But you still have choices. Don't give it more of you than it already has. We stood there until the sun slid down and the canyon turned into a single black shape. Then he went back inside, and I went to my SUV. I told myself I'd be careful. I told myself I'd keep some distance. That night, I drove my route with the windows up and the radio low. I didn't stop at any overlooks. I didn't turn off the engine except when I had to. Sometime after midnight, I checked the rear view mirror. A handprint stared back at me from the dusty back window. I pulled over, my heart pounding. I got out with my flashlight and walked around the SUV. The print was long-fingered, smeared downward like whoever made it had dragged their hand along the glass. I hadn't left the vehicle since sunset. No one had been out here but me. I wiped the print away, feeling no better. Back in the driver's seat, I gripped the wheel and stared at the dark rim line ahead. From somewhere far below, soft in the wind, I heard my name, my own voice, calm, steady, calling up from the stone. I didn't answer. But as I drove on, I knew the truth, even if I didn't want to say it out loud. I should have stepped back. Instead, without meaning to, I kept letting the canyon pull me closer. After the night, I found a handprint on my rear window. Everything began to fall apart. I don't know a better way to describe it. It was like the canyon had finally decided I wasn't just someone passing through. It had picked me, chosen me, maybe claimed me. And no matter how far I tried to step back, something in me kept leaning toward the edge. The whispers changed first. Before, they had sounded like voices I didn't recognize. Strangers crying for help, drifting words, echoes of old sounds baked into the stone. But soon, the canyon didn't bother with those anymore. It found something better. It began using my voice. The first time I heard it, I was in my kitchen at home. I had just made coffee, even though it was nearly midnight. Sleep had become a luxury I rarely tasted. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of hallways inside the canyon walls, long and crooked, with shadows crawling just behind me. If I did fall asleep, Even for a few minutes, I woke up feeling like someone had stood over my bed the whole time. I was holding the mug when it happened. A low whisper drifted in from the window, soft, almost gentle. It said my name, my exact voice. The whisper was so perfect that for a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, like an audio hallucination caused by exhaustion. But then the voice spoke again, a little clearer. Come look. My mug slipped from my hand and cracked when it hit the floor. Hot coffee splashed my ankle, making me flinch. But the pain felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. I walked to the window. Slowly, stupidly. The yard outside was empty, dark, still, but I knew what I heard. I knew the shape of my own voice better than anyone. And that was the moment I understood the canyon wasn't just echoing words. It was copying something deeper, the way a child copies the sound of its parents. From that night on, I heard myself everywhere. Sometimes the whisper came from the trees behind my house. Sometimes from the back seat of my SUV, even when I knew with total certainty that I was alone. Once, while hiking to a campsite to check on a report of noise, I heard my own voice call from somewhere behind a cluster of boulders. This way. I tightened my grip on my flashlight, but I didn't go to it. I'd learned enough by then to know that following was the worst thing I could do. The paranoia settled in fast. I kept turning around during patrols, convinced someone was walking just behind me. When I shined my flashlight, the beam lit only empty ground, but every hair on my body told me something stood just outside the light's reach. I slept less, ate less, talked less. Even Thomas noticed. You're slipping, he told me one morning at the station. That thing is wearing you down. How do I make it stop? I asked. You don't, he said. You resist. That's it. That's all we can ever do. But resisting felt like trying to stay awake during a storm while someone whispered my name on repeat. My own voice had become a lure, a hook sinking deeper every time I stopped to listen. By the end of that week, I'd made a decision. One that probably wasn't smart, but that felt like the only way forward. I needed to find the unmarked trail the old files mentioned. I needed to see for myself what was there, because whatever was calling me wasn't finished. I felt that in my bones. And if I didn't confront it, I knew it would keep taking more of me. The trail wasn't hard to find. The reports had been vague, but they all pointed toward a section of the North Rim where the cliff dipped inward slightly, forming a horseshoe curve in the rock. I drove out there on a moonless night, with only the distant glow of stars lighting the sky. I parked the SUV and stepped out, feeling the cold air slap my skin awake. The canyon stretched out beneath me, black and endless. The rim road behind me looked thin and fragile, as if the night could swallow a whole if it wanted to. I kept my flashlight low and scanned the ground. There, a faint path winding between sparse juniper trees. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. Half covered by sand. Narrow, worn smooth by time. I followed it. The canyon air grew colder as I walked, heavy enough that each breath felt like dragging ice into my chest. The flashlight beam flickered, but I told myself it was just the batteries. The first sign that I was close came when my light passed over something half buried in the dirt. Broken pottery. Large, curved fragments with faded red markings. Designs too old to place. Symbols scratched into the clay in patterns that made the back of my neck prickle. I knelt to look closer, brushing away sand. A symbol repeated across several pieces, a twisted line curling inward, like a spiral bent in anger. I froze. I had seen that shape before. In my dreams, on the hallway walls, etched into the stone, always glowing faintly in the dark. I stood up and kept moving. Farther along the trail, I found more pottery, some shattered, some chipped, as well as crude pictographs on the rock face beside me. Figures with stretched limbs, hollow faces, people falling into cracks, hands reaching upward. A cluster of marks that looked like teeth. The deeper I went, the more the pictographs changed. They became rougher, rushed, scratched with desperation. Something had happened here. People had tried to record it. Finally, the trail widened at a dead end, or what looked like a dead end. But as I scanned the rock wall with my flashlight, the light slipped into a narrow cut in the stone, A passage, barely wide enough for a person to fit sideways. A hidden descent path. It wasn't marked on any map. I'd never seen it during my years on patrol, but the canyon had been waiting for someone to find it. My radio crackled behind me. I jumped, spinning around. "Hello," I said, voice shaking. Silence. Then the crackle came again, softer this time. And then my voice spoke through the speaker. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't distorted. It was as clear as if I were talking into the microphone myself. "You remember this," it said. My blood ran cold. The voice spoke again. "You remember, don't you?" I didn't understand. Didn't want to understand. But the voice kept going, repeating something I had heard long ago, a fragment of memory I barely spoke about. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, I had climbed out onto a boulder near my grandmother's land and gotten stuck. I'd been too embarrassed to yell for help, so I whispered into the wind, "I don't know how to get down." No one else had heard me. No one was nearby. But now, through the radio, in my own voice, the canyon whispered the same words. "I don't know how to get down." The fear hit me so hard I couldn't breathe. The canyon had taken something from me. Something old, something small, something I had forgotten, and now it was using it. I snapped the radio off and bolted back down the trail. Behind me, footsteps echoed. Not mine. Something was following me, climbing over the same rocks, descending the same slopes, but the rhythm was all wrong. Each step landed half a second too late. Too heavy. Too long. I didn't look back at first. I focused on the narrow path, the broken pottery crunching beneath my boots. My breath came fast and sharp. My flashlight beam danced across the ground, shaking. But the footsteps grew louder. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Something pale crouched low among the rocks. Its limbs were long. Too long. They bent in ways they shouldn't, like they were jointed in 3 or 4 places instead of 2. Its back curved upward at an angle unnatural for any human shape, and its head was tilted far to the left, like it was studying me from an impossible angle. Even in the darkness, I saw the shine of its skin, colorless, smooth, stretched thin. No hair, no clothing, no face that I could make out, just an empty oval of pale flesh, turned toward me with a kind of curious hunger. I stumbled, almost falling. The thing shifted forward, slow but deliberate, dragging its fingers over the rock. The sound made my teeth ache. I turned and ran. Branches scraped my arms. Sand kicked up behind me. The canyon wind seemed to whisper in my ear as I sprinted. At one point, my flashlight flickered again, dimming to a dying glow. In the faint light, I saw the shadow of that pale thing moving behind me, jerking, stretching, folding itself in strange angles as it crawled over the boulders like it was made of liquid bones. When I reached the SUV, I practically threw myself into the driver's seat. I slammed the door and locked it so hard the metal rattled. My chest burned. My throat felt raw. I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking, and the moment the engine roared alive, I hit the gas. The tire spun in the dirt before catching, and the SUV lurched forward. In the rear view mirror, for a split second, I saw the pale figure standing in the center of the trail, still tilted, still watching, still wearing my voice. I sped away faster than I ever had on those narrow rim roads. My heart didn't slow for miles. Every time I blinked, I saw that long, bending shape in my mind. Every time I swallowed, I heard my own voice whispering the memory it stole. Because that was the worst part. It didn't just know what I said. It knew what I felt when I said it. By the time I reached the main road, one truth settled deep in my gut, a truth I wished I could deny. The canyon no longer saw me as a visitor. It knew me. It remembered me. And now, whatever lived inside it had a part of me it was never supposed to have. I should have stopped going back. I should have stayed home. I should have listened to Thomas. But I didn't, because something had already hooked itself into me. Something old, patient, and hungry. And soon, I would have no choice but to follow it deeper, into the dark part of the canyon where no map ever dared to draw a line. After I sped away from the pale figure on the unmarked trail, I didn't sleep for more than an hour at a time. Every night, I jolted awake with a taste of dust in my mouth, feeling as if I had been running to the canyon in my dreams. And each time, when the room was quiet and the world felt thin, I heard faint footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom. Just one or two soft steps, never more. I never found anything when I checked, but it felt like something was slowly closing the distance between us. By the third night, I knew I couldn't keep living like that. I couldn't just wait for the next whisperer, the next shadow, the next moment when the canyon used my voice like a tool. I needed to end it or at least learn what it wanted. The next morning, I called Thomas. "I need help," I said, voice cracking more than I meant it to. "I saw something real, and I think it knows everything about me." He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't ask for details or try to reassure me. He just said, "Come to my place at dusk. Bring nothing you're afraid to lose." Those words hit me harder than they should have. When I arrived at Thomas's small house near the edge of the reservation, the sun had just begun to sink. The sky burned with a mix of red and gold, and the shadows stretched long across the dirt. His porch light wasn't on, but he waited outside with a small canvas bundle in his hands. "You look worse than I expected," he said, eyeing the dark circles under my eyes. "You told me not to go near that trail." I said, "I didn't listen." "You listened," he corrected, "but you heard the canyon louder." I didn't argue. There was no point. He motioned for me to walk with him around the side of the house. Behind it sat an old pickup with a cracked windshield. The bed of the truck held ropes, lanterns, a coil of woven cedar, and a small pouch that smelled like sage even from several feet away. "What's all this for?" I asked. "For not going down there unprepared," he answered simply. He lifted the canvas bundle and unfolded it. Inside were traditional items: pieces of cedar, juniper needles, mountain tobacco, and a small carved figure shaped like a bird with outstretched wings. Thomas handled each object with slow, respectful movements. "These won't stop it," he said, "but they'll remind the canyon that you aren't alone." "I thought you said nothing could stop it," I replied. "Nothing can stop what it already knows," he said. "But protection isn't always about stopping. It's about keeping part of yourself safe while you confront the rest." We loaded the supplies into the truck, and then he handed me a small pouch tied with red thread. "Keep this in your pocket," he said. "Don't drop it. Don't open it. What's in it?" "You don't want to know," he said. I didn't ask again. We drove to the North Rim Road in silence, the headlights cutting through the coming dusk. The canyon looked different that night, darker before nightfall, heavier somehow. The cliffs seemed to sag under their own age, and the wind carried a strange metallic scent. We parked near the same hidden trail I had followed before, though I refused to let my eyes drift toward the rocks where I had seen that pale shape crouched in the dark. Thomas got out and took a moment to look at the sky. "This is the last good light we'll have," he said. "Once we go down, we don't speak except when necessary. And if something calls your name, no matter what voice it uses, you don't answer." I swallowed. "Even if it sounds like someone I love?" "Especially if it sounds like someone you love," he said. I nodded. Even though the truth was I wasn't sure I would have the strength to follow that rule. We grabbed the supplies and started down the trail. I felt the weight of the canyon instantly. It wasn't just a physical drop, but a sinking inside my chest, as if the place recognized me now. The air grew colder the farther we walked, and the whisper of wind sliding across the stone had a sharp, almost human edge to it. We passed the broken pottery first. The same pieces I'd found before. The spiral symbol carved into them seemed darker now, like the lines had deepened while I was gone. I reached out without thinking, but Thomas grabbed my wrist. "Don't touch what's been touched already," he warned. I pulled my hand back quickly. Next came the pictographs. They glowed faintly in the dying light. Stick figures falling into cracks, hollow faces, stretched limbs, teeth-like shapes arranged in circles. One symbol stood out from the rest. The crooked spiral, the one from my dreams. Why do I keep seeing that symbol? I whispered. Thomas paused, his eyes narrowing at the rock wall. "It's old," he said quietly. "Older than any story we have. Some say it marks a place where the world feels thin, where something slipped through. Others say it warns us to stay away." "And what do you say?" I asked. "I say we keep moving," he answered. We reached the end of the trail. The dead end that wasn't really a dead end. The narrow cut in the stone was even more unnerving now that I knew what had beyond it. I had to turn sideways to fit, my shoulders scraping the rock. The stone felt cold, almost wet, and for a moment I imagined something pushing back from the other side. When we emerged from the narrow passage, the world opened into a steep descent path, a hidden route winding down into a section of the canyon most people never knew existed. The air smelled different here. Stale, old, like something had been trapped below for too long. Thomas tied the coil of woven cedar around my left wrist and another around his own. "Don't let this break," he said. "If it snaps, you climb back up no matter what." I didn't argue. We climbed down slowly, gripping the rough rock. The path twisted like a spine. As we descended, the whispers started. At first they were faint, like wind brushing against the canyon walls. But soon they grew more distinct, sliding between the rocks with sound like teeth clicking together. I didn't look at Thomas, but I felt him stiffen beside me. "These are just old memories," he said quietly. "Keep moving." But some whispers didn't sound like memories. Some sounded like voices I recognized. A child laughing, a man humming, a woman whispering, "Come here." When one whisper shifted, matching the exact cadence of my own voice, I almost lost my footing. Thomas grabbed my arm. "Don't listen," he hissed. But it was already too late. The canyon had found its favorite shape again. My own voice drifted up the path behind us. "Wait." My stomach clenched hard. It sounded exactly like me, not tire me or scare me or angry me. It sounded like the version of me I heard in old videos or in memories from years ago. Calm, easy, familiar. "Wait," it repeated. "Please." Thomas didn't turn around. He pushed forward faster. "Keep your eyes ahead," he said. I followed, breath shaking, gripping the rock so hard my knuckles turned white. When we reached the bottom of the descent path, we stood at the entrance of a hidden chamber carved into the stone. I didn't know how deep it went. The darkness inside looked thick, like it was layered. The air pouring out was icy, and each breath carried a taste of iron. Even Thomas hesitated for a moment. "This place wasn't meant for us," he said. "But it called you, and if we leave it unanswered, it won't stop." I stepped inside. The chamber was larger than I expected. The walls curved inward like a giant hollowed-out bowl. Dust covered everything, except for the small offerings near the center, old carvings, feathers, pottery shards arranged in a circle. Some offerings were so old they had fused with the stone, but others were recent. A half-burned candle, a torn piece of cloth, a set of footprints in the dust. Human footprints. Fresh. My breath hitched. Someone or something had been living here. I stepped closer to the footprints. They were large, but not wide. Long strides. Deep impressions. The shape wasn't quite right, but the weight behind them was unmistakable. Something with mass. Something that moved often. Then the walls began to echo. First, I heard Thomas's voice. It came from behind us, though he stood right next to me. Then another voice joined it. Mine. It drifted from the far side of the chamber, soft and low. "Come here." Thomas grabbed my arm again. "Don't answer." Before I could speak, a third voice joined the first two. My mother's voice. Clear, gentle, loving. The way she sounded when she used to wake me up for school as a kid, whisper my name, so she wouldn't disturb anyone else. Hearing it broke something inside me. My chest tightened. My eyes burned. For a second, I truly believed she was here. Somehow, that she had found this place and needed me. I took one small step toward the sound. Thomas yanked me back, so hard my shoulder popped. "That's not her," he snapped. "You know that." But hearing her voice again felt like a hook buried deep in my ribs. Pulling, tugging, wanting. Then the chamber went silent, completely silent, until a scraping noise came from the far corner. A shape peeled itself in the dark. At first, it was just a shadow. Then it shifted, elongating, shrinking, widening. Its limbs folded in and then stretched out. Its head rotated like it was trying on different angles. It jerked forward once, and the stone beneath it shook. Then it took a form. Not a full human. Not anything recognizable. A shape caught between shapes. Its face rippled like water trying to hold an image. For a moment, it resembled me. Then it shifted into Thomas. Then into someone I didn't recognize. Then into my mother, her mouth twisted too wide, her eyes empty sockets. My stomach heaved. I stumbled backward, my legs shaking. The creature leaned forward, its long fingers scraping the stone, sparks flying from the tips. Then it spoke, in my voice, "Come closer." That was the moment I realized something chilling. It didn't just know me now. It wanted me. Thomas stepped in front of me, raising the carved bird and the pouch of protection items. The creature recoiled slightly, its face unraveling again into a blur of stretched skin. The air grew colder. The stone hummed beneath my feet. The canyon felt alive, breathing, listening. And I understood something then. This thing wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to choose a shape that I would follow willingly. Thomas whispered to me without turning his head, "We need to leave." Slowly. No running. No speaking. But the creature shifted again, and the next voice it used made my knees buckle. A voice I had buried years ago. A voice I had convinced myself I didn't miss. My father's voice. Soft, painful, familiar. It said my name once. Just once. And the canyon trembled. My father's voice. It didn't matter that he'd been gone for years. It didn't matter that the sound was coming from a creature that had no right to know anything about him. Hearing that voice filling the hidden chamber felt like a hand closing around my heart. My breath caught in my throat. My legs moved on their own, drawn toward that impossible shape as if the canyon had reached inside me and pulled on a memory like a string. "Don't look. Don't move," Thomas hissed beside me. But it was too late. I had already turned my head. The creature shifted, its form blurring and stretching, trying desperately to mold itself into the shape I believed would break me. For the briefest second, it almost managed it, almost pulled skin and shadow together into a face I remember from childhood photographs. A face I hadn't seen in decades. "Son," it whispered. The word hit like a shockwave. I took one step forward. Thomas grabbed me so hard my shoulder jolted backward. "No," he barked. "That isn't him. That thing doesn't know love. It only knows hunger." The creature twisted at the sound of Thomas's voice. Its form cracked, splitting into long ribbons of pale flesh that snapped back together a moment later. It shrieked, and the sound wasn't human, not even close. It was like metal tearing, like stone grinding against bone. The walls of the chamber vibrated. Thomas stepped between us and raised the carved bird toward the creature. With his other hand, he pulled the small pouch from his pocket and held it tight. "Eyes forward," he told me. "Don't let it see you break." He began to chant. The words were soft but strong, rolling through the chamber like a steady drumbeat. I didn't understand the language, but I felt it. The sound spread through the air, pressing against the cold space like warmth pushing back a winter storm. The creature shrieked again. Its limbs stretched outward, melting into new shapes. First into me, then into Thomas, then into a thin, trembling boy I realized must have been his brother. The face was hollow and desperate, eyes wide with fear. Then the shape shifted once more, twisting itself into the crying woman I heard at Spider Rock, the one whose voice had first crawled up the canyon walls to find me. Her mouth moved, repeating that same haunting plea. "Help, help me." But this time, I heard the lie in it. I heard the emptiness behind the sound, the lack of real breath. The canyon wasn't giving me echoes. It was stealing masks. Thomas's chant grew louder, fiercer. He tossed cedar and tobacco into the air. The smoke didn't rise. It swirled downward, pulled toward the creature like the canyon was trying to swallow the offering whole. "You don't belong in this world," Thomas shouted. "Go back." The creature recoiled again. The chamber shook so violently dust rained from the ceiling. Stones shifted under our feet. I stumbled, catching myself against the rough wall. The creature surged forward in that moment, sensing weakness. My father's voice came again, softer, pleading. "Come home." I almost stepped toward it. For a moment, an old memory wrapped itself around me. My father standing outside our house at dawn, his boots covered in red dust, his voice gentle as he woke me for school. For that heartbeat-long moment, I wanted to believe he was here, wanted to believe he was reaching out from some other place, calling to me across the years. But then something in the creature's face cracked, literally cracked, as if its skin had split under pressure. A long, jagged tear cut across its cheek, revealing nothing underneath. Nothing but empty darkness. The illusion broke. "Resist!" Thomas yelled, grabbing my arm and pulling me behind him. The creature reared back, its form unraveling. The whispers all around us turned violent, overlapping in a storm of voices. Mine, Thomas's, strangers, children, old men, crying women. 1,000 sounds layered together until the noise became a physical force pressing against my skull. The chamber walls shook harder. Rocks fell from above, smashing against the floor. Thomas held the carved bird high and yelled one final phrase, loud enough that it echoed through every corner of the chamber. The effect was instant. The creature convulsed, its body twisting into impossible knots. Its arms bent inward, its head snapped backward. Its form flickered between a dozen shapes, none of them holding for more than a heartbeat. Then, slowly, it began to sink. Not fall, sink. Its legs melted into the stone. Its torso followed. The canyon walls opened like wet clay, swallowing it piece by piece. Its final shape was a stretched, distorted version of me, mouth open too wide, eyes wrong, limbs trembling. Its final voice, my father's again. "Don't leave me." This time, the voice didn't pull me. It made me sick. Thomas gripped my arm tighter. "Don't listen," he said. "It's not real." The creature gave one last twisting spasm before the canyon walls sealed shut, closing the crack behind it. The chamber went silent. Not quiet, silent. No wind. No shifting stone. No echoes. Just the heavy stillness of a place holding its breath. Thomas lowered the carved bird, shoulders sagging. "It's not gone," he said, his voice low and trembling with exhaustion. "Not forever. But it's deep now. Buried. It'll take time to claw its way back." "How much time?" I whispered. He didn't answer. We climbed out as dawn crept over the canyon. The sky slowly brightened into soft shades of pink and gold. The shadows shrank back into the cracks. The whispers faded until they became nothing more than the sigh of wind rising from deep below. By the time we reached the rim, the sun was peeking over the horizon. Thomas leaned against the hood of the truck, breathing deep, sweat drying on his forehead despite the cold. "You fought well," he said. "I almost didn't," I admitted. He looked at me with tired eyes. "Everyone almost doesn't. You kept enough of yourself out of its reach." I wanted to believe him, but the truth was, part of me felt like something had been left in that chamber. A memory, a voice, a piece of myself I hadn't meant to give away. Thomas drove us back. Neither of us spoke. Words felt too small for what we had seen. When he dropped me at my SUV, he put a hand on my shoulder. "This place will remember you," he said. "It might call again, but you know the rules now. You keep distance. You stay in the light. And you never answer a voice unless you can see the mouth it comes from." I nodded. He drove away. I went home and slept for 13 hours. Years have passed since that night. I left the tribal police a few months after the encounter. I told my supervisor I needed space, time, a difference in the way the world felt when I woke up. I didn't explain more. There was nothing I could say that would make sense to someone who hadn't heard their own voice rising from a crack in the earth. I work a quieter job now. I don't go near the canyon anymore. I don't walk the rim. I don't camp. I don't hike alone. But sometimes late at night, when I step outside to take out the trash or watch the moon, the wind carries something soft. A faint sound. A whisper I can't quite make out. On those nights, I turn back inside immediately. Because even if it's just the wind, even if it's only in my head, what if it's not? What if the thing in that chamber found a new crack? A new way to crawl upward? A new shape to wear? What if it still remembers the sound of my voice, the shape of my footsteps, the weight of my breath? What if it's waiting? And what if one night, when the wind stops and the world goes still, I hear myself whisper my name again? If you're watching this, if you've listened this far, I'll leave you with one question. What would you do if a place learned your voice and whispered it back?